travelers. We're aware that your journey was difficult, but prepare to have your questions answered, for you have been granted an audience with the Masters of Modern.
And welcome back to Masters of Modern. I am your host, Alex Kessler, here with my co-host, Ben Bateman.
What's up? I'm just posting an Instagram story of us going live like a cool guy.
So cool.
So cool.
You're definitely, you're pretty cool.
Am I?
Yeah.
I got water on my shirt here.
That's
spilled
cool.
on myself.
You're just splashing.
You heard it here first. Alex Kessler confirms you're a cool guy.
The water cools you down.
Our producer was like, you guys need to get to the subject quickly.
Hey, just some of the fans are like, get to the content.
Hey, fans who like stuff that we talked about in the beginning, let us know in the comments, because we need you guys to fight against these. The actual episode starts at 10 minutes in the episode, skipping people.
Also, I'd like to say that as the person who makes the show notes, I put when the various things happen, in the show notes. If you really are chomping at the bit to get to these deck lists, I've put a link down below. Just go check it out.
I get to do the pointing thing below, and you can go look there, and it'll say we start talking about XYZ at certain times. And Marshall puts a lot of work into making so that you know the best time to tune into the best parts of the episode.
He's a really wonderful producer. He does a lot of work for us. These outlines here, yeah, it's all Marshall.
There's an outline.
This is a color printed sheet that's got a deck list. It's contrasted.
The tournaments that these happened in are in blue.
Yes. So those tournaments are Modern tournaments, and we are the Masters of Modern. We talk about Modern on this podcast. That's Alex Kessler.
I did that part.
I'm Ben Bateman. Oh, you did?
Yeah, I introduced ourselves.
Instagram
and then
story?
you said I'm cool because I got water on my shirt.
I was trying to just take over.
All right. So today we're going to be talking about the state of Modern. So there's obviously been a lot that's gone on. We had I think 3 sets worth of set reviews for the last quarter of the year that we've been going through.
Been insane.
There's been bannings. There's been no unbannings. There's been multiple moments where cards were problematic that have gone by the wayside. We've had, I think, 2 of the most influential sets in Modern history come out within 2 months of each other. Plus M20 came and ended up being at least 20 great cards, according to our episode last week, and at least 3 that people keep yelling at me that we missed. The red ley line, the green card that you like, the hate card, and one other one.
Oh yeah, that hate card is already a 4 of in every Infect list since it came out.
Which one are we talking about? Autumn's
Veil of Summer.
Oh, Veil of Summer. Okay,
that's if a opponent has cast a blue or black spell, draw a card, and you and creatures you control gain hexproof from blue and black.
That's right.
Fine. It's good.
And your spells become uncounterable.
That's right. The uncounterable part. So yeah, I think M20 is a pretty cool set. It is crazy to see Modern this much in flux. We were at GP Seattle together doing this live podcast, which I think you guys heard, and we kept having the conversation all weekend about what's going to happen, because this is the craziest that Modern's ever been. It's what would happen? How many cards are they going to ban? What are they going to unban? The theory was they're going to ban 3 cards, 4 cards.
And we talked about it. I think we came to the conservative decision that Bridge from Below was the card that I meant to talk about, was going to be the card that was banned.
Yep.
And that was the main target that had it on its head. What we ran into was we were going through a period of time where War of the Spark came out and introduced at least 5 different cards that at different histories of Modern would be insanely powerful introductions all at once. You had the Neoform added. You had
Narset, Teferi, Karn.
Yeah, and just those 4 themselves plus other good cards that are dope. Well, what's the wizard we keep talking about?
Dreadhorde Arcanist.
Yeah, Dreadhorde Arcanist
card's
is
amazing.
Turning the form on good call on our part.
We looked at it and we were like, is this Red Snapcaster? And the answer is yes.
Yeah,
it is Red Snapcaster.
Weren't we hot on that card, saying it was the best card in the set?
We spent half of our review episode just talking about flashing back become immense.
I've built that deck.
I don't think that has happened yet in a major Modern tournament, but you aim for the moon, you'll land in the stars.
But the moon provides the moon. The moon is a rocket ship, all right?
The fact that the card has... I will say this, so I built the double strike Naya deck on my phone with that and the red-white 1/1 trample vigilance double strike from whatever that set was. It's from a couple sets ago. I built it and I was like, okay, can you do some sort of turn 3 win double strike thing? And it's cool, but the bottom line is that Dreadhorde Arcanist is just a very, very powerful card, even with a groundswell. Literally just the fact that you can just 8 you if you don't interact with me is so good.
I mean, not even just look at the top most played cards in Modern history at any period since this podcast started, and it has been 9 1-drop spells and Noble Hierarch.
Yep.
Sometimes Spellskite was in there. Sometimes it's Tarmogoyf. Sometimes it's Snapcaster Mage. But like flashing back Thoughtseize twice is better than him to Torok.
Yeah. Really, really, really powerful. I am curious back on the initial Become Immense plan of how much fun it would be to try to build some sort of a blue-based one that could like control the top of your library where you were both playing Become Immense and Revenge of the Hunted with Dread Hurricanist, where you miracle it off the top to start the turn and then you're able to flash it back. I think that's pretty fun.
I just want to do the tutor and mill people with Thought Scour.
Yeah, it's good. That's fair.
I just want a Scheming Symmetry putting a Miracle on top of my deck, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, I'm going to Thought Scour you. Like, could you imagine, like, Scheming Symmetry to put this, Terminus on top of my deck, and then in your upkeep, I'm going to Thought Scour whatever you Scheming Symmetry, and I'll Terminus your board away.
It is surprising that
feels.
I do have to say, it is surprising that in Highlander, a format where all of the top of my library tutors are played heavily, like Mystical Tutor, Enlightened Tutor, Worldly Tutor, we play the crap out of Empiric Tutor, that I don't think I've ever Thought Scoured away someone's tutor target.
I've done it. It's fun.
Oh, okay, sweet.
It's cool. Yeah.
It like feels like something that should have happened way more by now. So anyway, you were talking about the crazy impact.
So we've had a bunch of really powerful sets come in, and obviously M20 is out right now, and and then the bannings happened with M20. So a big deck showed up. Hogak was one of the most powerful decks to ever enter Modern. It is as dominant, not as dominant as Eldrazi Winter, but it was comparable in numbers, and it's banned. Format's fresh off the press. We have 1 week, basically, or last weekend, and we're just kind of want to talk about like, where does Modern sit? Are the War of the Spark cards still problematic? How much has the new sets of M20 and more importantly Modern Horizons affected the format? And what are we excited about? Where do we think the format's going to go next?
Yeah, we've got a bunch of tournament results here for a lot of the recent big tournaments. We're going to kind of look through some of these, talk about some of the new decks, talk about what Modern actually looks like now. Because the crazy thing was those conversations about having to ban, say, 4 cards. It felt like the cards we were talking about were, Bridge was a big one. Obviously, Altar was one that people were talking about if you were going to try to ban multiple cards or maybe a different card out of that deck. We mentioned, Narset is an interesting one just because of what the interaction that it has with Puzzle Box and other cards like that. Karn, its interaction with Lycos and Lattice was one. Faithless Looting, of course. Ancient Stirrings is another card that's been on the chopping block for a while.
Yeah, I think walking into this ban list, the 2 cards I was that I believe are most likely to be problematic were Karn and not Neoform, but Allosaurus Rider due to Neoform.
Right.
Now we have our first weekend out the gates, seeing what people are playing. I do think that a grain of salt for this weekend, you have kind of 3 things going on. One, it's a fresh new format. So like there are strategies in the world that are generally better when you know what the format looks like to some extent, or know what you'll be facing against, or know what you can be praying against. And those decks, because we don't know what the format is, it's hard for those decks to be played in large numbers. So I don't think we're at a point yet where we know what the best deck of the format is. And,
no.
The other issue is like card availability is a thing. Like there's M20 cards that might be more significant than we're knowing and people just haven't been able to try them out yet or gotten their hands on any. And Modern Horizons is also a very heavily unopened set. Just getting cards, going to a local card store and finding physical copies of Modern Horizons cards. I snap bought Ren and 6s that were Chinese and I generally don't want to own that type of card. Because I like to read my cards, and if I don't, I'll make mistakes.
Ren and 6 has several lines of text.
Yeah. But because they're the only 2 I found at the entire convention floor at Magic Fest Seattle. So like, I think we are going into a format that like even first weekend is not the exact thing, but there's a lot of really interesting information here. A lot of really cool decks have shown up. There's a zombie list we're going to talk about. Grixis Urza is like everywhere and done really well out of nowhere. So I'm excited about the format.
I think that's probably a pretty great place to start for us, actually. And before we do get into Grixis Urza here, I do want to just give a couple quick shout outs about where you can find us, where you can support us. Patreon.com/theMMcast is the best place to support the podcast, our ability to have a producer, all that stuff. It's very, very helpful for you guys to do that.
And we just kind of updated it so you can, the big thing that we're definitely contributing towards is that we have a Discord channel, and there are Patreon exclusive sections. Me and Ben are making an effort, and there was a 2-week period where it was broken. So I apologize to all of our patrons, but the Discord deck list section is now available. And so anytime we come up with a cool deck idea, we spend a lot of times on airplanes where the only thing we have to do is to just brew on our phones. We'll start posting it onto the Discord server. We want you guys to start posting your deck list on the Discord server for patrons. And then there's just a bunch of other stuff that we're working on for that. The plan is to start releasing raw episodes where you get like all of this content plus all this stuff that's going to be edited out. So you get like a full in-depth experience. You heard me and Ben yell at each other, or if Marshall thinks we're just wrong or talking about a dumb card too long,
wrong.
you get it.
Yeah, so the Patreon is a great place to support what we're doing. We already mentioned Twitter. You guys also can check out the Facebook group. It's the largest modern Facebook group, one of the biggest Magic Facebook groups actually in the world at this point. It's got north of 5,000 people, and
The world's strong. I don't know. I can't confirm that.
Yeah, we do.
There could be like a Chinese Magic group that has like 3 billion people. They don't have Facebook.
We've there had been complaints at one point that the group was toxic. We've really worked hard with the moderators to make sure that we're policing that. We're trying to make sure we keep it a better place, a more healthy place. We believe it needs to be that. And so just in case you guys, maybe you left at one point, go check it out. We're working every single day to try to make it better.
If you see something problem,
hit
the alert button. We look at them and generally we take them down.
Absolutely.
And yell at people.
So yeah, that's, those are a couple of the quick shout outs there. I think we should talk about Grixis Urza. I think it's a good place to start considering how much we like Urza. It's shown up in a bunch of these lists. The SCG IQ William Swart was won by Grixis Urza. You've got multiple copies here. It looks like second place at one of these, second place at one of these. It's a really interesting deck.
Most of the lists are essentially the same. And the big highlights are highlights from recent sets are Urza, Goblin Engineer, Arkham's Astrolabe. Those guys are all, and the Snowlands are all seeing a lot of play, and Prismatic Vista to fetch out the Snowlands.
So first off, called Goblin Welder.
I did.
We were just hyped about. Oh, you were also on the train.
That card,
we guessed it on Brainstorm Brewery to do their set review for Modern Horizons because we talk about Modern. And my first card, number one pick card I'm most excited about is Goblin Welder, and they're like, I don't know if it's gonna happen.
Goblin Engineer
or Goblin Engineer. Sorry, not Welder.
Our modern impression of Welder.
Goblin Engineer.
I mean, it does a very good Welder impersonation, and it also entombs an artifact, so it's comparable to Welder in many ways.
I was laughed at. No, they didn't. They were very nice. They said they didn't think it'd be a thing, but it's showing up. It was in it and Urza were in more top 8s this weekend than I think any other deck or at least any other new deck.
It is fascinating that Horizons seemed to be a set that was heavily, heavily interested in people playing Thopter Sword combo. It just seems like they looked at the format and they were like, we think Thopter Sword combo would be good for the format. It blocks Phoenixes very well. It's slow and grindy. It stops a lot of the unfair things. They can't just dredge you out with prized amalgams. If you're gaining lots of life and blocking, you'll survive and be able to come back. I think in some ways it is really positive. It's funny that it goes infinite with Urza. By the way, we were wrong about it going infinite with Grand Architect. The reason we had never come to that conclusion is because it gives the creatures +1/+1. They're blue creatures. So they become 2/2s, so they don't equip the sword. I really like this deck a lot. It's playing a lot of the cards that Marshall just mentioned. It's kind of like it's Grixis Whir. I mean, it's very similar to it. It's just playing a slightly different sort of suite of cards to get to the same outcome. You're winning with Thopter Sword for the most part, which goes infinite with Urza. Urza's an incredibly powerful card, kind of like a Planeswalker in himself. Gets you advantage when you play him. The Arkham's Astrolabe is kind of exactly what... I think it's one of the most interesting parts of the printing of some of the cards on Horizons. They looked at it and they were like, okay, so what are some things Modern doesn't have right now? What's something that doesn't exist that could? And it's a 1-mana artifact that draws you a card. How can we make it so it stays in play, draws you a card, you can repeatedly bounce it, you can do, because Mishra's Bauble, you have to sack it. So it's kind of has a little bit, and it's a turn behind. So
all the draw effects you got to sacrifice to get the card.
Yeah, but it's how do we have something that you can play on turn 1? Because so much of Modern is about what are you doing on turn 1, what are you doing on turn 2. So if you want an artifact-heavy deck that needs to get artifacts in play, being able to play one to draw a card on turn 1, even if the thing you're getting off of it is pretty marginal, doesn't matter. And I think that's such a cool thing for them to identify and be like, yeah, that's fine. We can just print that.
Minor complaint. You know how they've now given all of the artifacts really cool colored borders for colored artifacts? Why didn't snow colored artifact get a cool border? Where's my snow border?
Purple, purple border.
I wanted something sweet.
Or just little snowflakes around the edge for it and Ice Hide Golem or whatever.
Yeah, this is the stuff.
You'd also be happy to know that that it plays one Ichor Wellspring. So that
You know, I'm a
sweet
fan of that
synergy with Goblin Engineer.
Well, that's like the one thing I think it is a little bit different than kind of the prison decks is what it does is it's more of a hate bears deck, right? Like it's playing a bunch of different tutor targets of artifact hate cards that it can go find with Goblin Engineer, not Welder. That's my new.
This is new one.
Now that bridge from below is gone, and there's only one ensnaring, one bridge in the format. There's two. There's a planar bridge. Planar bridge is in the format, right?
Yeah, but no one plays that.
I know, but someone yelled at me when I said there's only one bridge in the format.
You should yell back, there's only one bridge in the format.
There's also Battle at the Bridge.
That's not a bridge, though. There's
Moss.
It's a battle bridge.
There's Moss Wart Bridge
Mosswort
also.
Bridge.
There's lots of bridges.
It's a strong point.
But
Alex has been beaten. You can see it in his face.
But what I thought was interesting is, it plays sort of like you're playing a Karn the Great Creator in the deck. Only you're not. You're getting to play your sideboard in your deck of a bunch of one-shot cards that you can go fetch with your Goblin Engineer.
And it tutors for combo. Like the point is that it tutors for Sword of the Meek. That's why it's good.
Right.
For the people that haven't put that together, is the deck is playing the Sword of the Meek combo, and part of that combo wants to be in your graveyard anyways. So it's able to find the sword to put in your graveyard, and then you are able to find the Thopter Foundry by sacking something that you haven't play with it later or whatever.
If you play Welder on turn, or if you play Engineer, if you play Engineer on turn 2 and it gets you the sword, and then they kill the Engineer, and that's the last that ever happens, because of the nature of that card needing to be in your graveyard, it effectively acts as a very important tutor for the deck. Like it is essentially putting it into your hand. And if you could play a 2-mana tutor in that deck that would put the artifact you need for your combo into your hand, you would probably play it.
It's better than putting it into your hand.
Because you don't cast it, essentially.
It's putting it into play, because once it's in your graveyard, as soon as a 1/1 shows up, you get it. And doesn't Karn, or is that can make a 1/1? You just can't have artifacts in play?
Right. And it's also cute, like, if you're holding the Thopter Foundry and a Goblin Engineer, then you're on, Gravy Street. But if you're holding the Sword of the Meek and Goblin Engineer, you're still fine, because the Goblin Engineer goes against Thopter Foundry, and then you cast the Sword of the Meek and trade them out with the Engineer.
So the decks we're talking about today, we're looking at the SEG Modern Classic, the SEG IQ Williamsport, the SEG IQ Eau Claire. Is that what it is? Eau Claire. The SEG IQ Katy, Texas, SEG IQ Columbus, SEG IQ Lexington, Kentucky. Now, of these tournaments, one of them was actually won by Greg Zerza. That was the IQ in Williamsport. And second place went to Greg Zerza at Eau Claire. So, plus multiple other copies. But the
Third
fact
place, and Katie, the only one that didn't show up was the Classic.
Yeah, so it showed up a lot. It's powerful. I think do you think it's a good deck for the format? I like it more. I actually like it more than I liked the Grixis War decks. I'm a bigger fan of this deck.
I mean, the biggest pieces are there's a lot of ways to fight artifacts. There's a lot of ways to fight creatures. I think it's fine for the format. Obviously, depends how good it is, right? Like if it's so good it becomes a problem, then it's a problem. But I think this is healthier than Tron, and Tron is fine.
Yeah. So moving on to, let's just say, Tron.
Okay, sure.
The SEG Modern Classic was won by Eldrazi Tron. So was the Katy, Texas tournament. So we have 2 of these tournaments won by Eldrazi Tron. Now, Marshall, can you confirm for us the list on either one of those? It is much more like the Walking Ballista mid-range Thought Not Seer version.
Yeah. The notable recent inclusions is it's now playing, of course, 4 Karn the Great Creator and 2 Ugin the Ineffable, both out of Ugin the Ineffable, another important card out of War of Spark.
How much does Ugin the Ineffable cost?
6, but it makes all of your colorless spells cost 2 less.
Oh, it's Mirror Superior's best friend. I forgot.
It's also Eye of Ugin.
It's essentially because it's colorless. Yeah, it's colorless spells, so it hits both your Eldrazi and your artifacts are 2 cheaper, and then it also comes down and can just nuke any colored permanent the turn it comes into play and live, and then just start drawing you a card every turn,
making threats.
How many Walking Ballistas are these lists playing?
Looks like 3.
Yeah.
And then, of course, 4 each of Matter Reshaper, Thought Not Seer, and Reality Smasher.
Yeah, so much more the mid-rangey, not quite aggressive.
Yeah, they gained a lot from having Blast Zone added to the format, too.
It's a really good deck. This is another deck, Eldrazi Tron.
Blast Zones for more of the Spark? That's nuts.
Eldrazi Tron's actually another deck where I'm a fan of this deck. Like, I have been a fan of Eldrazi Tron for a while. Now, it's possible that Great Creator pushes it over the edge into being like less fun to play against.
I have no problem with people casting big, dirtily dudes that attack you. I think that's good for Magic. I think Wizards agrees. I think that it's fine. I think the biggest issue, if that deck is an issue, is more in line with, the issue before was Ugin made it not big dirty dudes attacking you, is making like a combo deck on turn 1 attacking with a bunch of power. But the one issue could be just Karn. And Karn's issue isn't necessarily going to make one deck too powerful. It's going to be ubiquitous in the format. So, like, a lot of people are like, oh, but their decks aren't winning. It's more that Tron's playing Karn, Eldrazi is playing Karn, red-green Scapeshift decks are playing Karn, Amulet Titan decks are playing Karn.
Right.
When every single deck that can cast a 4-drop is playing the card, that's when... Is the Urza deck playing?
Urza is it because it's playing
playing
silver bullets in the main.
Oh yeah. 'Cause you're playing with,
and then some Azorius Planeswalker control decks are running Karn too. Yeah,
because obviously there's the Karn Mycosynth Lattice game plan, but like the fact that it just gets you any hate card you possibly need, no matter the deck you're playing against, is like super relevant.
Some decks still just can't beat Ensnaring Bridge.
Yeah.
like it's just like still a thing.
And there's a ton of cards like that. There's there are a bunch of decks that just can't beat Grafdigger's Cage. There's a ton of decks that can't beat Dampening Spear. Or what's the everything costs 3 mana now? Trinisphere. People can't beat. People can't beat.
A Witchbane Orb is pretty. Is the thing they're playing a lot of.
And it has
or just a single Worm Coil engine.
Yeah. And Wasteland is like if you use the art. What's the thing that makes turns lands into artifacts? Turns anything into artifacts for what you tap it.
Liquid Metal Coating.
Liquid Metal Coating. Like they're playing that because you can just start strip mining people every turn.
Right.
Like there's a bunch of different things it can do that are powerful enough that it can go in any deck, and because it's colorless, if Karn was like snow mana, which would have been really dope, I think it'd be more fine. It's the issue is that just any deck can kind of play it for free.
Do you feel like Karn is still next in line for a banning, or do you feel like and right now where we're at, because I missed your guys' conversation with Michael in the M20 review about the bannings.
It was with Marshall.
Oh, it was Marshall. And so your guys' conversation there was about the banning of Bridge was basically testing the waters. How is Modern, if you get rid of this one weird Future Sight card that doesn't actually interact in the way that Magic cards are supposed to, now what will the format look like? Do you think that Karn would be next, or do you think it's probably still Faithless Looting?
We didn't get too deep into the thing. I don't think it's Faithless Looting. So the one thing that Wizards' announcement for the ban list, for the Bridge from Below ban was cards that are the glue that hold multiple decks together are cards that we are not looking to get rid of. Meaning that the cards like Faithless Looting and not Ancestral Visions.
Ancient
Stirrings. I'm never going to remember that card.
Or even Mox Opal, probably to some degree.
Mox Opal, yeah, exactly. Mox Opal, these are cards that they're not looking to get rid of. What they're looking to get rid of are cards that put decks over in power level or become... I think Karn is an example. It's ubiquitous in a way that becomes a problematic depending on fun game states that we think can get rid of, but save as many decks as possible. If they ban Faithless Looting, 7 decks die.
Right.
If they ban Bridge from Below, 1 deck gets worse. If they ban Ancient Stirrings, 12 decks die. If they ban KCI, that deck is worse, and other artifact decks that take advantage of those engines will get more, are still seeing play. And then you get Urza decks and other artifact decks. So I think Ancient Stirrings is fine. I think Karn is a card that I would put a target on. I think the Allosaurus Rider ban is something that and that's kind of one of the decks I was pointing at, didn't do so well this weekend. There's one deck in the top 4 at the SEG IQ
of Neo brand
of Neo brand decks, but I think part of that is it was a deck that people kind of knew could be a problem coming out of it, so it probably had a little bit more of a target than normal on its head, and B, it's glass cannony, so it really is maybe going to find a place where it's too powerful, but Griswold brands have been around forever. That deck is not new, and the question is this deck too good version of it? Which it might be. It might be a situation like Amulet Titan was before the ban, where it's just too fast and glass cannony, because that deck was not good in the sense of consistency. It was just, it could win on turn 2 too often.
And good players could really pilot it. I mean, I think it's a strong point you make. We had talked about Grishelbrand as one of those decks that was on the fringes for a long time, and it does in a lot of ways feel like it is just the same thing. I mean, in all reality, it costs blue-green to Neoform, so if you Manamorphose into your Neoform on turn 1 with a Simian Spirit Guide, sure, you can go crazy. Mm-hmm. But by the same standard, you can do very, very similar things with the Grishelbrand deck. It's a turn 2 win also very consistently. A Faithless Looting on turn 1, followed just by putting your Grishelbrand into play with the Gorya's Vengeance, and you win. Mm-hmm. So they feel similar. I'll be interested to see. They're both very disruptible. An opening hand where you get thought seized and you lose your Goryo's Vengeance, you probably just lose the game then. You know, like that happens, and then you don't really want to walk into tournaments where that's the case when the card you're going to lose to is one of the most ubiquitous cards in the whole format. Not to mention the fact now, of course, that
Force of Negation.
Force of Negation, yeah. So
so I think they've added more tools like Force of Negation to fight it. They've given tools to mid-range decks to be better, like Ren and 6, so that there are more thought seizes in the format. And you know, so that's Neoform, which I do think does have if I were to make a ban watch list, I think that they are on the list. The next cards are the Teferi and Narset control cards. And those are weird. There was a good quote on the internet recently of just like the sad thing about those two cards and the static planeswalkers is that multiple of them are super powerful in an unfun way, but not powerful enough to ever be banned. And so like in essence, add a net negative to the format theoretically. I'm not saying I necessarily agree that they add a net negative, but add a net negative to the format but not in a way that's going to be so powerful that they get banned out of it. And so that's kind of the other option, I think, is looking at those two cards. I don't think they're going away. I think if you're banning a card there, you ban Puzzle Box because it's another kind of Yu-Gi-Oh card to me where it's like it just like does something weird.
Yeah, I think, you know, when you look at we've talked about this forever, right? The impact of a 1-drop or a 2-drop in Modern is that if it's good enough, it'll always get played. The impact of a 3-drop is different, right? A 3-drop has to come down. It has to affect the board in a meaningful way, in a way where it means you're advancing the game state that you'll probably win on the next turn, or it means that you're interacting with your opponent in a way where you're like blood mooning them or something like that. And these static planeswalkers have the ability to immediately do that, but then also generate advantage for you if you get to untap with them and just keep doing it.
Or generate advantage immediately. Narset impulses, and Fairy bounces and draws you a card.
And so the opportunity cost to play those cards is very, very low because they cost 3. They are blue in a world with Force of Negation, and they both draw you a card the turn you play them. So like I think they're pushed in a way that's interesting. I don't necessarily know that the static planeswalker thing is great. I don't actually know if it's a great thing for Magic.
I think it's a cool mechanic. I think it's great when it affects your stuff. The problem is when it's used as a hate card or affects your opponent from doing things is problematic because people mess up. I mean, we've talked about this, I think, before on the cast, but like the amount of people that have just like lost because Narset is in play and they like not lose, but like they try and draw an extra card, or lose because Tamio's in play and they like went for a discard effect or a sacrifice effect to try and save themselves, and they're like, nope, sorry.
I talked to Jerry T in Seattle, and he was like, I was like, yeah, I say voicing this exact same point, and I was like, and I think there's the gameplay aspect of it. He's like, matter of fact, I cast a brainstorm right into a Narset earlier today. You know, like I think that's a strong point.
Like, so. But like, you know, what's the punk rock Gruul guy? Domri's plus, so just +1/+0 to all your creatures. I think that's fine. Like, that's not better than any ward that's ever existed.
Right.
Like, there's a bunch of net positives on your side that I think are good.
There's been a lot of talk of referring to them as the curse planeswalkers, the ones that put a negative effect on your opponent, being significantly worse for Magic in general than the bonus planeswalkers.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the other boogeymen of the format decks. Over here, SEG IQ Lexington, Kentucky was won by Is It Phoenix. Second place in that tournament went to Red Phoenix. Looking at the rest of this here, I don't see a tremendous amount of Phoenix decks in the top 4. Red Phoenix over here and Katie. You've got that was the ones I was pointed out to begin with.
Sure.
Is It Phoenix in 5th place over here at the Modern Classic.
But so it has a ton of top 8 appearances.
Very powerful, right? And there's the Red Prowess deck now as well, which has similar feelings. It's not all that different. But I think Phoenix to me still feels like one of the most consistent things you can be doing in Modern. It's not a very hard thing to do.
Phoenix is, I think, a great deck for Modern. I think Phoenix is just the next Death Shadow. Like, I think there's always just going to be kind of like an aggressive mid-range deck, and that deck is always going to be really good, and it's going to have a different flavor every year, and there's going to be a new thing that makes it just slightly better, and just like the format's going to get more powerful around that deck, and then they'll print a new thing where Death Shadows was that, and then Phoenix became the next version of that. Humans kind of took that in a moment and is still around as that version. I think that's good for the format. And then everyone's like, oh, how do we deal with this? This is the largest piece of the format. This is too good. Ban Faithless Looting. But like, just you'll eventually the format will adjust around it.
Adapt. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think one of the coolest things about that point is that, you know, what Phoenix is doing, like, okay, let's just say perfect world. You turn one, you faithless looting, and you dump, 2 Phoenixes into the graveyard. And then on turn 2, you like faithless looting again, and you dump another Phoenix with like a Manamorphose and another spell, and you attack for like a ton of damage on turn 2.
12 at most.
And now you're set up, like that's a really powerful, unfair thing you're doing. You're doing something that is not like, you aren't playing a fair deck at that point if you get that draw. However, that's the extent of the most powerful thing that deck is doing. It's not going to win the game on turn 3 by comboing out and going infinite. It can play free counterspells and Force of Negation if it wants to, but it still relies on playing a lot of red cards in the deck. So it doesn't feel like it's pushing past, like it doesn't get into that like the space where like a Narset and a puzzle box is like, oh, this was fun. Game over. Like it's just it's different. And I think a good fair deck, a pushed fair deck, is a good thing. And when you see the power level of Modern rising, and it has been rising for a long time, it reminds you of why having really good fair decks is so important. You mentioned Humans just a second ago, which will be the next probably deck we'll talk about because it's got some wins. Some. I think Humans is great. I think Phoenix is great. I have no problems with those decks.
I mean, look at the decks we've talked about so far, right? Like Phoenix's best hand, which is nuts, is you attack for 12 damage on turn 2, right?
Yep.
And then you win on turn 3. Neoform just outright wins on turn 2.
Yep.
Karn decks, if you get to turn 5, lock their opponent out of the game, period, without any way to really interact with it. Urza decks go infinite on turn 4.
Turn 4 with Karn. You play a second tower on turn 4, you lattice off your Karn.
Turn 4 and Tron. Yeah. Turn 4 and Tron. Turn 4 in Urza decks go infinite. Infect is, I think, a turn 3 deck. Like, all of the blue-white control decks stop these guys from doing what they're doing pretty easily early on, and then also just lock the game out on turn 4 with puzzle block Narset. So like, this is the turn 4 format as a cap.
I know. I mean, that's probably the biggest takeaway here, right? So you and I have been doing this show for going on 5 years pretty soon, and when we started the format, it was Jund versus Splinter Twin. And they were turn 4 decks in the sense that Jund, if they curved out with Thoughtseize into Dark Confidant, into Liliana, into Bloodbraid Elf, was probably going to beat you on turn 4, or at least stop you from like winning the game if they had resolved all those things. Twin, end of turn, they play their Pestermite, they untap, they win. Like that was kind of how the format worked. And
and Birthing Pod was the third piece of that.
Yeah.
That was the rock, paper, scissors, right? Like Jund beat Twin beat Pod beat Jund.
And it was because the power level and consistency of the cards in the fair deck were high enough that if you just like curved out like that, you were great. And the power level of Twin was that it was a janky 4-mana sorcery speed enchantment you had to cast on a creature to win the game. Neither one of those things feels oppressively powerful,
right,
but they both feel reasonable.
Right.
It's not the same thing as winning on turn 2 with a Neoform. I've watched somebody play that on stream for 3 hours once. Just like, okay, if I watch him play 20 games, like what will this look like? And it was awful. It was terrible. It was just the same sequence of events over and over and over again in the first few turns of the games. And the games he would lose would just be like, okay, he got disrupted. It's just like he got disrupted and he lost. And the games he would win were all the other games. So
I do want to bring up next, because on this conversation, and it's from that era as well, as Bant Infect. Because I think that's another big hot, and it won the IQ and
Eau Claire,
which I'm never going to say correctly. Luckily, that's not a card; it's just a place.
People in Eau Claire. I like to eat Eau Claires because sounds like
an eclair.
Sounds like an eclair.
I get it. So Bant Infect. So the cool additions of it has Teferi is a big one, and then there's one other new white card, right? Giver of Ruins. So it has the protection from
really powerful.
Just like a better version of Spellskite in a lot of ways, because it's a better attacker on its own and can protect the cards you need to protect. And if they waste a removal spell on your Giver of Ruins, great. That's one less removal spell for my important creatures that have Infect. And then it has Teferi in there, which if you play Teferi and you have an Infect creature that can attack, you win in that deck.
Yeah.
Although this version that won was going without Teferi.
No Teferi's? Okay. But yeah, just even Giver of Ruins is enough of a piece to that, and Teferi's an option at times. So I think this deck, it's great that Infect is back. That's another one that they definitely wanted to push coming out of Modern Horizons. They were
Veil of Summer in the sideboard.
Okay, yeah. Fine.
And scale up, I'm assuming they're the offender.
Yeah, they got 3 scale ups.
It's really powerful.
Yeah, I think as you were saying with the unbanning of not Mentor, the Meek, Sword of the Meek, and just like, and then this set they printed multiple cards that could get Sword of the Meek up there in power level. They banned a bunch of cards that hurt Infect a lot, kind of against Infect's, not because they were trying to hurt Infect. They got rid of Gitaxian Probe and printed Fatal Push within 3 weeks of each other. And basically Infect has been a thing, but not really since then. It's cool. Like, and they knew that Modern Horizons, and they printed cards specifically there to try and give Infect a position back at the table.
I really like the Infect deck. As I mentioned, I was messing around on my phone with this double strike thing because I've played this green white thing in Highlander, and so I was like, oh, in Modern, is there some sort of double striking thing you could be doing that's comparable? Like, does that exist? Because Fencing Ace is coming back in M20, and you have that. I wish I could remember the name of this Boros creature. It's the most pushed version of what it is.
It's like Boros Vindicator.
Yeah, something like that, exactly. And it's like 1/1 double strike, trample, vigilance for red white. So like it's totally set up to be that card. And
We weren't here last week.
What?
Continue.
What was the conversation?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But it's the artifact, the new 10/10 +10/+10 for 8 equip 1 mana to put into play.
Oh, right.
We were talking about that with double strikers, where you can like Sigarda's Grace, or use the
just
core,
put it on
core
there.
equipment person to put it on any of those big red
Double strikers.
just to like do 20 damage with it.
Well, so when I was working around with that, I was like, how can you consistently get, because like really you need the creature to have trample or evasion in some way. Like a Fencing Ace is not going to get the job done in Modern, it just won't do it. Like I think you could maybe, but I was like, you have Dreadheart Arcanist, which is really good, and you have the Vindicator, which is a really good version of that, but you don't have another one. So I was like, okay, so how can you do this? And I started like looking around, and I was like, the old commune to nature, 1 green, dig 5 for a creature. And you can now play the blue-green version from whatever the most recent ban set is. It's the Incubation, the card I like so much because you can play it for green. If you have like 1 blue source, then now you have a removal spell on the backside. And then I was like, oh yeah, but you can play the Bloodrush creatures. You can play Slaughterhorn. So you're basically getting a giant growth that you can dig for on turn 1, and then Giver of Runes in the deck. Because I was like, okay, Giver of Runes makes the idea of doing something like this really cool because all your pump spells are green, so you're never going to have to worry about giving protection from green and like nuking your...
Are you playing the Arcanist?
Yes.
So how does Arcanist get along with Bloodrush creatures?
That's obviously the one piece of it that doesn't match, but that's only one piece, right? But like, so what we were talking about, like laughing about Become Immense with Dreadheart Arcanist, like that's not the dumbest thing in the world. Like you are attacking for 13 on turn 3.
I think that's a thing that will get done by someone. I mean, who knows if it's going to be FNM level to tournament level, but I mean, Become Immense targeting Dreadheart Arcanist, then allowing Dreadheart Arcanist to target the Become Immense.
Yep.
Because it's big enough to target it to then do it again to itself is a thing.
Like
that's
a really
plus
good thing.
12/12 for 1 mana.
It's also the kind of thing where you can put it on your Dreadheart Arcanist, and then you can flash it back and put it on the other double striking creature that you have on the battlefield. I had forgotten to put Scale Up in the list, which seems absurd because like that's so good with the double striker. But anyway, my point of all this rant was it's a fun list, and I tested it a bunch, and it wasn't probably good enough. But the core. The Giver of Runes was the key thing that I was like, okay, now you have a 1-drop that's going to allow this deck to work. Because when you play your double striker on turn 2, now you can protect it.
Well, and fun fact, you know what cards all technically have the words double strike on them? Infect cards.
Right. Which obviously. And you have 1/1/1 creature in that deck, and you have the land that are the reasons.
You have the blue one, the unblockable.
But he costs 2 is my point. So all your creatures in the deck I'm talking about cost 2, which is like why it's a step behind.
Yeah. Well, they all cost 2, and they also like a lot of them don't have evasion, or the ones that have evasion get worse. Versus the 2-drop has pure evasion, and then it's a 1-drop that's a double striking 1-drop, and then you have a flying land.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah,
yeah.
But no, I'm not saying what you're talking about it doesn't have legs. I'm just saying that the reason Infect is getting there first, at least.
Yeah.
Because of that.
I agree. So talking about the rest of the stuff that's on here, I would say Humans is the next major piece. It got 2nd and 3rd place at the Classic. It got 3rd place at Eau Claire. It won Philly. It got 3rd. I already said Eau Claire. So yeah, I think those are the major finishes in the top 4s.
Anything dope or new out of the Humans list?
Most are playing 2 or so Unsettled Mariner.
Which makes sense.
Which is the blue-white.
Changeling.
It's the new Merfolk.
I'm pretty sure it's a new.
That force spikes any spell that targets you or a permanent you control.
Card's really powerful. I've drafted it in Horizons like 3 different times now.
Okay.
And it's just generally good. It's just like really, 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 really good.
There's a lot of things without it having to be the creature type that you needed at any moment, and then it's also the creature type that you need.
Exactly.
And also, just about every collected company list, and humans is sometimes a collected company deck and sometimes not, but like Collector Oof is seeing a ton of play in sideboards.
Which makes sense.
Because having a Stony Silence that can attack is great.
I mean, Collector Oof is probably a card that if I was ever going to go back to Superior Burning Cocoa would be an absolute just slam dunk.
Sure,
It's one of the, obviously it makes my Aether Vial worse, but I would still bring in 3 or 4 Stony Silences out of the sideboard just because it was good enough to nuke the artifact decks. And the fact that you could main deck a copy of Collector Oof now is pretty outstanding.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what those deck looks like now with Eldorami's Call and the Vizier combo being available too. Like I think you would move towards that list, but you also have the new, what's the green X reanimate
Finale of Devastation.
Yeah, finale. Like you could do a pretty cool finale of devastation. I mean, that's what to be totally honest, that's the list I'm surprised isn't being more seen on this last weekend was the finale of devastation.
Devastating Druid.
Devastating Druid lists. And because those were doing pretty good against the Hogak decks. Like that was a pillar of the format then. And it looks like they've kind of disappeared.
I mean, one of the things that's crazy to me is like, if you talk about the deck that I was playing back then and what I would play now, think about the number of good 2-drops that they've printed that have utility since then. Back when I was playing, we didn't have Selfless Spirit. We didn't have a Remorseful Cleric. We didn't have Collector Oof. I now have a Stony Silence. I have a Nuke Your Graveyard, and I have a Make My Team Indestructible, all that are 2 CMC creatures with 2 power.
I thought Selfless Spirit was printed like middle of the last time you were on a
it's possible.
That's like when it came out.
It's possible, but I definitely know
I agree.
Remorseful Cleric is one of the best pieces printed for it in a long time because just like having a nuke for your graveyard in my main deck that I can get with Fauna Shaman is pretty strong.
My graveyard?
Yeah.
Why would you nuke my graveyard?
So you play Dredge.
Innocent.
So talking about the last couple decks on here, I think there's a few interesting ones to mention. Dredge ends up here in second place at Columbus. We'll get that one in a second. Dredge ends up, and I think you see Dredge and you see Bridgeless Hogak, which I think they're obviously different decks, but they're doing
not the same thing.
They're doing graveyardy things with like...
Yeah, but so is like Jund too. I mean, like Dredge is doing classically what Dredge does. Filling its graveyard, using its graveyard as a resource. The Hogak deck is more of... I mean, I don't know what the exact list looks like, but I believe it's more of just like a value.
It's mostly a Vengevine deck. Yeah. I mean, it looks a lot like what it was before they banned Bridge. It's just now that they don't have Bridge, they're just leaning more into we still have Hogak and Vengevine, so we just have... very aggressive, very resilient. So now it's more like an aggressive, resilient, fast.
Well, one of the
Goldari deck.
On one of the streams I did on our YouTube channel, which I've done a couple of now, we had a supporter come on and pledge money to the super chat to talk about his list, and it was basically that. It was it was Bridgeless Hogak. And he was playing without Bridge and talking about that it's just a very aggressive, just a very good deck.
You still get your turn 3 wins. Like
you attack with a lot of power.
You can, like, it has the Phoenix thing, right? With the Phoenix thing we just described, you get 12 power in the air. This can get 16 power on the ground. So
the reason I loop in Dredge in the same conversation is that Dredge is doing something unfair. It's doing something unfair in a way that I think the Hogak deck isn't, but they're still in the same family of they are turboing their graveyards early on in the game to put an aggressive presence to attack with. And while Dredge will win with Creeping Shield, it still is usually attacking to win.
Sure.
Some highlights of this Bridgeless Hogak list is they're playing 4 Hollow One, so it's folding Hollow One into Hogak. Okay. But it's playing the same creature suite of like Insolent Neonate, Stitcher Supplier, Gravecrawler, Carrion Feeder, but sliding in Street Wraith, and then it's running Burning Inquiry in addition to Faithless Looting. So it's basically taken the Hollow One deck and shuffled it into the Hogak deck, and then taken the Bridge and Altars out.
You get the 4 cyclers, for 12 cards. You lost 4 cards anyways with Bridge going away. You're not. Is it playing Altar still or no?
No.
So you lose 8 cards and you gain, and you just have to figure out spots for your wraiths, and it works. That makes sense.
The gentleman who shared the list, if you're listening to this or watching this on
John
YouTube,
Martin.
John Martin.
He was the second place finisher in the SEG IQ.
No.
The guy who shared the list on the stream I was talking about.
Oh, gotcha.
It's exactly what you're talking about. He was playing Hollow One. I questioned the decision to play the two things together, and he said it had won a lot. It was getting him top finishes in a bunch of tournaments. So if you're listening to this or you're watching this, my intention was actually to go over the list with Alex on air, and I didn't have it in front of me. So leave it in the comments. Let us know that it was you who, because you're totally onto something now with the post banning. It's really cool to hear that your deck is actually the deck that's showing up here.
Yeah.
And also,
What if it's the same person?
it could be. If you're watching this, listening, like, subscribe, comment. By the way, we didn't say that earlier. The YouTube channel growing is like one of the big
Key ones, there's a bell, but also just like likes are, I think, a little bit more important than they used to be as far as the algorithms go. So if you're like, I don't know if I'm going to like this, like it, we'll give you a like right now.
We like you.
Thumbs up.
We like you. So I would say that the very last deck to talk about, because it won SCG IQ, was Azorius Control, got second place at Williamsport. Looks like those are the two big finishes for it.
There's some cool. There's like an Elves finish in top 8, and one of them, Jund, we talked about a little bit already, and all the tools it got multiple top 8s.
And we have a Vile Goblins and a Zombies list here we want to go over in just a second that were just kind of cool finishes that Marshall pulled, which I think are just dope looking lists. But the Azorius Control deck, can you tell us, Marshall, are they puzzle box decks? Are they...
There are no puzzle box decks. They're running Big and Little Teferi. Some are running Jace, and they're all running about 3 Gnar sets, because it turns out...
Right.
I mean, Narset is base value, even without shenanigans. She is a draw 2 card, impulse twice. She's impulse twice, and your opponent's card draw spells are turned off. Which
Turns off Faceless Looting.
yeah, it turns off Phasal Looting. It turns off their Opts and their Serum Visions.
And you
all
playing Vendilion Click?
Yes, some of them are playing.
So yeah, that's the other tight Narset play, is if you click someone with Narset in play, it's
after they've drawn their card but still in their draw step.
real good.
Barf.
Oh, that's so good.
Instant speed Thoughtseize that has a 3/1 attached, and you don't lose any life. Instead of the life loss, you get a flying 3/1.
Very barf inducing.
So yeah, deck sweet.
Yeah.
I'm super excited. That's gonna be what we talk about.
I actually think when you talk about a lot of the decks here in Modern, I think one of the decks I'm the least happy about is what happened to Blue White Control. I actually don't.
Boo.
I don't think that Teferi and Narset existing in Blue White Control makes those decks better for the format. I think it makes it worse. Actually, I think it's kind of unfun. I think it's kind of unfun to play against.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan.
Shame.
I'm not a fan of playing
We're
against
talking
them.
about that, but they're probably the two best decks to fight against some of the shenanigans you were just talking about.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Like a fair control deck, a control deck that is like powerful in doing things that are stopping stuff like Neoform and Karn locking people out. Like I think Karn's way worse.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. No,
Especially
Karn's my most hated card in Magic right now. Like that guy can so get the banhammer and walk home. He starts with 5 loyalty. Yeah. He can do his -2 twice and still be alive.
It makes the deck that I think people are the most miserable to play against, being Tron, double miserable.
All right, so the last couple decks here to talk about are the Zombies list and the Goblins list. The Zombies list finished 5th place at the IQ in Philly. It's pretty cool. It's funny, when we looked at this list, I was like, where is Relentless Dead? And you guys were like, that card isn't good. Haven't you been reading the memos? Magic's evolved.
Is it like in there and we didn't notice?
No. Okay. I just think it's funny because I had wanted Relentless Dead to be good since they printed it. I have always liked the design of that card. I always thought it was really cool, but like it was never powerful enough to push zombies into playable. And like what's going on here is.
Well, I mean, like in the last year, they've gone a bunch of pieces between the Amonkhet gave them a bunch of tools for zombies. Plus now you got Undead Augur and
Wayward Servant. That's from Amonkhet, right?
Yeah, that's the one from Amonkhet. Where's because Lazatep Reaver is War of the Spark.
War of Spark.
Yeah.
And that one's really only in there just because it makes 2 zombies for 2 mana.
Yeah, which is
good enough.
Elves plays what's the 2/2 elf and get a 1/1 elf if you have an elf.
Dwynen's Elite. Yeah, it's basically the zombie Dwynen's Elite.
And Goblins. So let's see what's.
And it's really good because the deck plays like 4 Crypt Breaker, which is like one of your ideal turn 1 plays. So if you go Crypt Breaker into Lazatep Reaver, you can activate Crypt Breaker's draw a card right then and there.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Because it's like tap 3 untap zombies to draw a card.
It's got the Heritage Druid effect where it doesn't have a tap symbol. So you can just do it the same turn. That's really cool. That's really cool. I've always liked Crypt Breaker. I've always been kind of fascinated with that card, but I had never found a way to do it properly.
And I do think it's cute. The deck plays 4 Dark Salvation, which if you don't remember, it's from
mana,
Eldritch. Right? No. It's from Eldritch Moon. It costs XX black, and its target player creates X 2/2 zombie tokens. Then target creature gets -1/-1 for each zombie you control.
Oh, so you can just pay for 1 black to do damage.
Yeah, well, for 1 black, it can just like neg something for as many zombies as you have, and then for each additional 2 mana you pump into it, you get a zombie.
I always thought of the base value of that card being something you'd cast for 5, but that's why I remembered it costing 5 in my mind. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That's really cool.
and
3 mana for a 2/2 that does, and then you do 1 damage to something isn't that good, but 1 mana to do however many zombies drain versus, and then late game it has the death ray shaman effect. Good in the early game, great in the late game.
In a way, it's also a little bit like a munitions expert in that if you've gone like turn 1 a zombie, turn 2 a zombie, turn 3 Dark Salvation, you get to neg 3 something. Assuming you pay it for its full 3 mana. Yeah. But you don't even have to pay it for its full 3 mana if you drop like a 2-drop zombie and play it for 1,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also cool here to see, obviously the Carrion Feeder Gravecrawler engine that we've seen in the Bridgevine decks showing up in a proper zombies list, as well as playing Tide Hollow Sculler, where you have that ability with the Carrion Feeder on turn 1 to then play your Sculler on turn 2 and sacrifice it with the trigger on the stack to be able to permanently exile the card, which is like a classic trick and just a very cool thing you can do.
Well, and it's doing the humans thing, right? But with 4 Thoughtseize and 4 Tide Hollow Scholar, you don't even need to do that level of things. You have 8 hand disruption spells that eventually you just rip your opponent's ability to do anything out of the game as you're beating them down with 2/2s. And then, I think and if they then try to respond, you have different answers to be able to fight it. It's really good.
Diregraph Colossus is like a 3-drop, is that right?
It's black. Oh no, it's
black 2 for a 2/2, enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each zombie card in your graveyard. Whenever you cast a zombie spell, put a 2/2 black zombie onto the battlefield tapped. That card's dope.
And it goes crazy with Gravecaller and Tidal Scholar.
Yeah, and Carrion Feeder.
It just gives you a lot of value on a pretty big body, depending, like it scales, like we were talking about, it's one of those cards that just scales better as the game gets on because your graveyard starts having more and more zombies, so it starts being a bigger and bigger 3-drop.
Well, and with Wayward Servant is the one that drains 1, gains 1 life whenever a zombie or a creature enters play. So like this drain effect with Carrion Feeder and Gravecaller lets you just kind of go off. Like eventually you just have enough of a board position where you're fireballing your opponent every turn and gaining that much life.
I love the 2 Worship in the sideboard. So dirty in a zombie deck. So hard.
And Stony Silence too. Yeah. It gets to play some fun.
So now Stephen Francis over here piloted red-black Vile Goblins to a 3rd place finish at SEG IQ in Lexington. So you got 4 Vile. It's a standard creature deck, and the old legacy Goblins decks would play Vile. So this is probably functioning a lot closer to those.
I'm so excited that Warren Instigator is in this deck. This is like a real. This is the Goblins deck that Goblins is supposed to be, not like a weird fecundity deck. It's like playing 4 Warren Instigator and 4 Aether Vial.
It's only playing 4 of cards, and those are Aether Vial, Goblin Ringleader, Goblin Matron, and Warren Instigator.
I mean, how many, Warren Instigator's got to be on the top of most people's lists of underrated mythics we've wanted to see work forever.
I had the first deck I ever won a standard game with, not to mention tournament or whatever, had 4 Goblin Guide, 4 Warren Instigator, 4 Siege Gang Commander, 4 the Tunnel Goblin that you can tap to let a 2/2 be unblockable.
Tunneler, 2/1, Eldrazi.
And then 4 of the at the beginning of combat, give a creature you control +2/+0, 4-drop 2/2 Goblin.
Battle
Rattler. And I beat someone once. I was like, this is the first game I've ever won. An FNM.
So dope. I think Instigator,
excited.
I think Instigator has got to be I feel like that. I can't think of many mythics because the cheaper a mythic is, right? If it's a creature that's mythic rare and it costs 2 or less, you've always looked at all of them probably and been like, there has to be some way this is good, right? This must be good. What am I missing that I can't make this stupid card good?
The big thing about this is after Black-Red Goblins started really making a scene in Modern, Auntie's Hovel, the MTG Finance crowd got into it, and Auntie's Hovels are $20 now.
Oh, wow. I mean, so it's playing Siege Gang Lieutenant. That's the new one, right? The 4-drop one, the black one. It's playing
Palace Shook Moors, right?
What's Goblin Trashmaster?
That's the 4-drop 3/3. All your goblins get +1/+1, and it's sack a goblin, destroy an artifact.
Got it. Cool. And then
So it's a good silver bullet against all these various artifact decks.
Earwig Squad.
Earwig Squad costs 3 black for a 5/3. It has Prowl for a 2 and black. No, for 3 total. It has Prowl for 3. And when Earwig Squad Prowl is, you may cast this card for its Prowl cost if you have dealt damage this turn to a player with a goblin or rogue.
Got it.
Yeah. So
Rogue son.
So basically, he's a 5/3. He's a 5/3 for 3, assuming you've dealt damage to your opponent this turn.
Got it.
And when Earwig Squad enters the battlefield, if its Prowl cost was paid, search target opponent's library for 3 cards and exile them.
Okay, cool. All right. So
I was going to say what it really seems like is Modern has reacted nicely. So we're in a place right now where it doesn't feel like there's a public enemy number 1 totally unfair deck. You look at these top 4s of most of these, and it's not like just tons of like incredibly broken decks. It's a lot of fun, pretty fair stuff. There are a few problem cards. There will always be a few problem cards, no matter what. Right now, for me, it's the Planeswalkers, I think, that are on my radar as the toughest ones. But I feel pretty optimistic about Modern going forward.
yeah, I could see us losing Allosaurus Rider. That's like the one I still think is like and it's for the same reason that we lost Amulet Blue or Summer Blue. Like it just is a deck that Sam Black or who was his teammate that also top 8'd that Pro Tour?
David something?
Okay.
Sam Black?
Yeah, a pro player is going to take the deck and that is good enough to like take it to the next level, and then just there'll be consistency, and then like a cheater will do well with it. I'm literally just describing what happened with the Amulet Titan.
Yeah.
But and like that led to a card. There's like precedence for a deck that's like too consistently winning that early, and then obviously the all 3 of the Planeswalkers we discussed, I think all have different problems. But I think for the most part, I think the blue-white ones are healthy, and I think Tron, and the issue with Karn is that just he's colorless. I think if he was any color, it wouldn't be nearly as much of an issue, because like I don't think he's more powerful than Urza. It's just Urza requires you to be playing very specific colors.
Yeah, I agree. The last thing here before we sign off, Marshall put a list together of cards from War of the Spark, Modern Horizons, and 2020 that are having an impact already. And we won't read the full list here, but just in case there's anything in here that we missed, we didn't talk much about the Horizon lands. They're showing up in a lot of lists. They're unbelievable. Obviously,
they're in everything.
Yeah, their Prismatic Vista is obviously.
If you're playing a list without a Horizon land in it, you're probably playing it wrong.
You're probably behind.
Played land probably in the format,
and every single one of them is seeing play.
What deck is playing Hexdrinker? I haven't seen Hexdrinker.
There's some Jund lists that are playing Hexdrinker, and there's a few mono green stompy decks that are running Hex.
That makes sense.
Both Jund is now basically adopted Ren and 6, Hexdrinker, and I'm going to call him Sexy Pyromancer, but he has a real name. Season Pyromancer.
Do you know Season Pyromancers are $25 at the moment?
Not expensive.
I was going to say Season Pyromancer, I'm going to say, is probably the best 3-drop red has ever had.
Yeah, I think those are the main ones. We talked about almost every other card on here, really. The only other stuff that we didn't really mention, Ashiok is just not a card that we talk about. The 3-drop Planeswalker. It seems like Ashiok was going to be insane and like didn't come up a single time in this whole podcast.
It's a strong sideboard player.
She's a really strong sideboard card that blue, black, and/or black decks will play forever.
Yeah,
but she's not like gonna.
Icefang Codal, Plague Engineer, a couple other cards, but I think we covered most stuff.
Oh, Icefang Codal is showing up everywhere. Like, and it's not necessarily in these top 8s. Like, that's just a card that if you're looking at lists that are doing stuff. Like there's a bunch of 5-0 tournament leagues on Moto where it's like winning them. So
Icefang Codal ninja lists and stuff.
No, they're not ninja lists. It was like Jund. I saw Arcanist lists. I saw what was the one that you shared, or Michael May shared it. I don't know, but I've seen them not in that. Like I've seen them just in like weird random places.
Well, because I think people are like something that doesn't necessarily seem like right at first. Like you don't have to have the snow turned on for Icefang Quaddle to feel like a good card.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
like
really
a a 1/1 flying flash that draws you a card for 2 mana is already sweet.
Right. And you really don't need the death touch that often, that early anyways. You need the death touch on like turn 5. You don't need it maybe turn 4. 1 through 3, it can probably block a bunch of stuff as a 1/1 and kill it anyways. It has the Lingering Souls issue that Infect hated Lingering Souls back in the day, because if I attack to it, I have to play or remove. I have to pump my guy to be able to survive getting blocked by a 1/1, which means that your card cost me a card. Yeah, no, I think it's good. Excited. I think that's it for the episode, right?
I think that's going to be
Yeah, the main thing I wanted to make that big list of Modern Horizon cards was just to laugh in the faces of all those Commander Horizons jokesters out there. Probably card for card, Modern Horizons is the most impactful set on Modern ever printed. So
it's. I mean, we were hopeful.
War of the Spark is the closest I can think of.
and War of the Spark added, maybe 8 or 9, 10 cards that showed up, which is a significant number. But right there is a list of at least 20, 25 cards from Modern
I would
Horizon.
remove the lands as 1. I think that's cheating.
That's still like 20
But
cards.
still 20 cards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's impressive. So, guys, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Be sure to follow along on social media. You can follow me at Ben Bateman Media.
I'm at Kess Wiley. We are at the MMCast. Marshall is
At Marsh Unfocused.
And make sure to subscribe. Make sure to like. If you're on iTunes, make sure to review. If you're on our Patreon, thank you so much. And please comment with what your favorite War of the Spark card is.
Yeah, and back.
Modern Horizons or both.
We'll be back next week with another episode on time together, 2 weeks in a row. Woo! Bye, guys.
Thank you for your attention. See you later, alligator.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media, sending podcasts into the future.